Hello, everyone. I'm going to give it a minute so that people can come in before we get started. So just file in, look at our pretty faces. Ooh.
Hey, hang on, Taryn. Patience.
Oh, look, we have a hand raised.
Yeah, I know. I saw.
Oh,
And Catherine doesn't have makeup on. Catherine.
Catherine, we can't see you anyway, but I really appreciate you warning.
No, Catherine, we're listening and looking into everyone's home. No.
Okay, I have us live on Facebook, so that's exciting. Good. I'm glad that you
Hey,
know.
Darren. Thank you, baby.
Oh, you have such fans.
And Erin says, "Is that my mom in the background?" Lorraine. she has to get in the final word.
It's true. Love it. Okay. So I think we can get started. I don't think anybody here will miss the introduction. But hello, everyone. I'm Megan Anderson. I'm the events coordinator here at Parker Red Books. We're so happy to have Stuart Watson here tonight to talk about his debut memoir, What She Said and What I Heard. How One Man Shut Up and Started Listening. Radical title. As many of you know, Shauna Morgan was supposed to moderate this discussion and be the host. However, they cannot be with us tonight, sadly, so I've stepped in to discuss with Stuart, which is great. We're really excited to have him. We will do a reading at the top part of this, and then I will ask Stuart some questions, but we really encourage you guys to have your own questions and comments. I see some of you have found the chat, and you're more than welcome to chat in there with us, but if you want a question that is answered at the end or a comment that is said at the end, please put it in the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. We will post some of those and try to get to many of those as we can. Also, before we start, I just want to remind everyone that by attending this event, you are agreeing to the Parker Red Books Code of Conduct, which is an absolutely zero harassment zone. Any harassment will not be tolerated. And if you do exhibit that in the chat or in the questions, you will be automatically expelled from this event and future events. But I don't think that'll be a problem. Let's have a lovely conversation tonight. And with that being said, I will introduce Stuart. Stuart Watson hosts the ManListening podcast, featuring conversations with strong women who face tough times and bounce back. As an investigative reporter, he's a 3-time winner of the Peabody Award for Excellence in Broadcast Journalism, a 2-time winner of the DuPont-Columbia Silver Baton. He also received a Nieman Fellowship in Journalism at Harvard University and served on the board of Investigative Reporters and Editors. This is his first memoir. Before we begin, the last thing I want to remind you is to get this lovely book. You can come get it at Parker Red Books. You can come in the store. You can order it on the website. You can give us a call. We have signed copies and we can have personalizations if you so choose. So last thing, remember, if you have any questions, just put them in the Q&A and we'll get to them at the end. Stuart, you can start.
Megan, thank you for doing this. And I thank Sally, and this is like a lifelong dream of mine, you know, to come to my favorite local independent bookseller, because I've been a Parker Red Books fan for so long, you know, so I've got to gush about you and Sally Brewster and how nice you've been, and also to offer up wonderful healing energy, thoughts and prayers to Shauna Morgan, who was supposed to be with us and asking the tough questions. And, you know, I hope she's feeling better, but she was laid out by this virus that's hampered so many of us, and I'm thinking about her. And Shauna helped edit the book. But I know that Phoebe Pressler's here, and also Mel Graham, who edited the book as well. Lorraine, are you going to do that? Are you browsing?
we like Lorraine in the background.
Okay, she's heard it all before. She's going to want, you know, she's heard it a million times, is what she said. Some of you guys know that my birth mother, my biological mother, is in the hospital in Savannah, Georgia right now, and she just had hip surgery yesterday, and it was really quite serious because she's 84 years old and she has COPD. And so we were all very nervous about that, but she's resting, we are told, comfortably, and we'll go back to Swainsboro, Georgia. And so our thoughts are with her. This book is about all the women in my life. It was the way I was able to get a memoir down. And the very first woman in my life was my birth mother. The most important woman in my life is milling about here, pretending not to listen. But I thought I would start in my mother's honor, but the beginning of the book, which is my beginning. This is, I will try to get through this without crying myself. It's called Making My Mother Cry, and each of the chapters has a photograph. This was my birth mother when she was in nursing school when she got pregnant with me. So each chapter begins with a photograph, a cut line, and a quote from a woman. And this chapter began with the quote, "What kind of a girl gives away her baby?" Helen Brett Schmid, birth mother, Emmanuel County, Georgia. She was pregnant in the summer of 1958. This story is recounted in 2015. On shame. She was standing in her kitchen with a tissue. We'd taken a break from filming her interview when she said it. I'd made my mother cry. What kind of a girl gives away her baby? That baby was me. I felt kind of shitty that I'd made an old woman cry and frustrated that it wasn't on camera because I'm a monster, okay? It was 1958 when she got pregnant with me. Her father and the Baptist preacher did what men did back then. They shamed her. And then they cooked up a scheme for her to get rid of it. Me, it, whatever. That scheme involved shaming this poor woman, a hopelessly naive 22-year-old, no longer a girl and barely a woman. The two men sent her to a boarding house in Macon, Georgia. There she would tend to old folks to earn her keep. She'd stay out of sight while she got big enough to call attention to herself. At nursing school, they said she was at home. At home, they said she was away at school. Nobody compared stories. Turned out that scheme was quite the rage at the time. It was called adoption. The Georgia Department of Public Welfare was in on the deal. I've got the paperwork. I started life as a little white welfare baby, a ward of the state sent to a foster home with a passel of other kids. Some magazine writer hung a name on this era, called it the baby scoop. I have struggled to come up with my own words for what happened to mother and child. I have settled on the word amputation. The mother grows old, toting the phantom body of an infant in her gut. And the child grows up with the invisible scar from learning that its mother loved it so much that she cut it off and gave it away. But that's all my stuff. We're told Mother Mary kept all these things in her heart. My mother shoved the shame way deep down where she'd never have to think about it. And it stuck. Buddy, you won't believe how it stuck. When I contacted her 45 years later, let's just say I was a mixed blessing. What kind of a girl gives away her baby? Well, white girls mainly during this era. It was just economics, the law of supply and demand. Black families kept the children of single mothers tucked away within the family with grandma or auntie. Infertile couples wanted children that looked like them, hair, skin tone, shape, the whole bit. They did not want children who did not look like them. This was true of couples of any race, but many white couples had the money to buy Barbie and Ken. When the boys came home from war, some of them couldn't conceive. Their mothers and wives in their new cracker box houses kept asking about kids. Meanwhile, across the country, some other clueless couple was fogging up windows. America had not yet begun to look to places like Korea, Romania, Guatemala, and Sudan for a UN family. The age of first consent had dropped, and so did a million or so babies. I'm one in a million. Thus, the institution of adoption changed. I can't say it was born. It's more like this big church and state-backed adoption scheme was adopted. My mother's lifelong shame was not really about me at all. It wasn't about being caught having sex outside marriage or even the stigma of illegitimacy. I was a little bastard long before I became a big one. No, my mother's shame was that she disappointed her father. My mother loved me enough to tell me her truth. She was the good girl, the firstborn of 6, the favorite who fell from grace. She fell hard. When her father found out about her pregnancy, his blood pressure spiked so high he was almost hospitalized. As we say in the South, he nib out had a stroke. He was trapped between impossible choices that he made for her, keeping the child and enduring unending shame, or losing his firstborn grandchild. He picked the latter. She went along. Lintorn Anthony Brett was a self-made farmer who pulled cypress from the Georgia swamps, stumps from the fields, and crops from the land. He took the whole family to a little white church in the country every time the doors opened. Family dinner, church, holiday gatherings, all Bretts were present and accounted for. This was non-negotiable. Nobody took a pass and sulked in their room. He'd whip your ass. To hear my mother and her family tell it, family meant the world to Dada Brett. But faith came even before family and farming, so he arranged for her to give me up. My maternal grandfather drove to Macon and picked up his daughter the day after I was born. She was alone. He met her in front of the hospital and helped her into his truck. Then he said words she'd never forget. I guess I'll never meet my oldest grandson. He never did. When she sheds tears now, it's not for her nor for me. I'll just tell you what she said. Broke his heart.
Ugh, that last line really gets me. I guess we can just begin. Why did you write this book now? After years of successful investigative journalism and now podcasting, what was the push that got you to get us this memoir?
I didn't know how much longer I will live.
Oh man.
You never know. I mean, you never know. I mean, my sister died last year. We didn't see that coming. And, some people you think are going to pass don't, and some people you don't think will. And so it's just what I said, either I was going to write it or somebody was going to talk about it over my dead body, and they were going to get the story wrong. So I might as well beat them to the punch.
Well, I guess that's one way to look at it. I think the second most obvious question is, what do you say to people when they read the title, What She Said and What I Heard, and their response is, should you, a man, really be writing this book? Also, for the people watching who haven't read, he addresses this beautifully in the preface, but we all know that we judge a book by its cover, and this has man with duct tape on his mouth, but obviously still speaking because there are pages. What do you say to people when they say that, when they don't know?
Well, I think the photo says more than the words. I think people will see the photo before they see the words. And what she said and what I heard are two completely different things. I mean, just ask my wife, literally verbatim what she says and and I found us, whether you want to call it a counselor or a therapist or whatever, I would say, well, what she means is, and she would go, no, what did she say? What were the literal words she said? And so I had to back up and get the verbatim right, not to add my interpretation, but just what did she say, And then I think it surprises, there's a reason there's a black back cover to this, is because you might think this is some sort of cutesy little, I don't know, some sort of, funny little story, some sort of little, and then when you read the back, you start to get into adoption, trauma, addiction, suicidal ideation, people who actually take their own lives. You're like, whoa, this is not like a little fun romp. It really is chapter by chapter in how I got it wrong, and a lot of the mistakes that I made. It's really not a defense. It's not me saying, but you don't understand, you don't know me and blah blah blah. And it's like, you're right. I got it wrong for a long time, and I still, get it wrong a lot of the time.
I think that kind of answer would really resonate with someone. And I think you're right. I think the back is so, I don't know, influential, at least to the regular book buyer, to be like, oh, I see what's going on here. With that in mind, who is the audience for this book? And I'm going to push a little further. Who would you love to see reading this book versus who you think realistically would be drawn to this book?
Well, Phoebe Pressler at Spark Publications beat on me because, like any first-time author, she goes, who's your audience? And I said, everyone. And she said, no, wrong answer. Who's your audience? And then she kept beating on me. So Megan, I can tell you who I thought it was. Then I can tell you who I think it is today. And then we're going to start seeing who walks in the doors at Park Road Books, or who goes anywhere else, whether it's an ebook, an audiobook, or whatever, and buys the book. And so there's what I imagine, and then there's what is. And so what we imagined was that women would buy this book for men. Mm-hmm. And then I literally paid women. Bernadette's here tonight. She can testify. I paid people to read it. Advertisers, marketers, people who are a lot smarter than me. And these women said, well, we like this book. We'd buy it. My girlfriends would buy this book. And so we shifted and said, okay, more women buy books than men. This book was aimed at talking to women. So let's just say women 35 and above, because I think that, Shauna, who was supposed to be here tonight, was 29 when she started. I think she aged about 5 years. But I mean, she was under the demographic, and Mel Graham, who edited it, and Phoebe are bang right in the demographic, which is sort of, I think it's safe to say, more middle age, like 35 and above, 40 and above, and we took a cap off of it. We were going to say 35 to 65. And then we said college educated or earn over a certain amount of dollars. And then we said, no, just throw it out there and see who, And so we're doing some advertising along those lines. And I think we'll know a lot more later on.
I'm super excited to see the trends of what people say about it. Because I'm 33 and I've read half of it, and I feel like I can think of like 5 people I want to give this book to. Some men, some women. So I think it has resonance. Like I really do. Honestly.
From your mouth to the market's ears.
Can't wait to sell it to all of Charlotte. Did you read any memoirs in prep for writing this book? Were there any memoir influences that you found while you were writing, that you were recalling, or that you went to in the writing process?
Well, there's a lot of alcoholism and a lot of recovery in this book. And so I was really curious. And the 2 that I name check are, why not go with the best? Mary Carr, who wrote 3 memoirs that I know of. But the one Lit was really about her drinking career, the end of it, and her recovery. So that is a extremely well-written, very literary kind of memoir. This is great story. This is not great literature. It's just great story.
I mean, those lines blur.
Yeah, but I mean, she's, teaches at Syracuse. She's the best. And then there's a guy, God rest his soul, that I just adored, named David Carr. He spells it Carr, and he wrote a book called Night of the Gun. And Night of the Gun was him he was at the New York Times at the end, and he was in a documentary about the New York Times, and David Carr went back and talked about the depths of his cocaine addiction and what he remembered, but he re-interviewed all the people to get it right. Like, he did the investigative reporting on his own life, like the depths of his addiction and then recovery. So he would interview, well, my children stopped sending things to the family group text. No, you can't get around the question and answer line and get your question answered first. That's not fair. Look at all those other people.
We're a democracy over here at Parkridge Books. No nepotism.
Okay. Yeah. What else you got, Megan?
Okay. Well, a lot of women's perspectives and stories are in this book. Most of them are white women. Most of them are straight, cisgender women. Not all. There are other perspectives in there, but a lot. How did you navigate this lack of diversity in making this memoir? Because I think you draw some large conclusions and make some large premises, and you do include some diversity, but how did you sort of overcome that obstacle or work with it as a writer?
What's a conclusion that you would say is what's a conclusion that you would say, well, that's a white man? Like, is there something that you bumped up against and said, that's a cisgender boomer white guy?
I guess not, because I feel like you went through the trials to be like, because the largest conclusion you're making is that men need to listen, and I feel like all the sub conclusions don't really they're not.
Let me give you, for instance, I don't have very many Asian friends, so if you look, or for that matter, I don't think I have single trans friend, and so that kind of speaks to me, so you're not going to see Asians or trans people represented in the book. Now, in terms of, if you take the population of Charlotte, it's about 1/3 African American. Well, this book is not going to be 1/3 African American because I didn't grow up, and what I did try to do was include the African Americans who were influential in my life, some of whom, when you look to the very beginning, there's a chapter about there's a chapter about an African American woman named Louise Dukes, and but there's a photo, I'm trying to find it, there's a photo of a woman, I don't even know who she is.
This one.
Yeah, there we go. And that chapter is before the chapter about my mom, and I'm like, so here's this woman, and I'm like, I need to go to Albany, Georgia and figure out who this is, but I can't because of COVID. And but it's like, I want to say thank you to this woman. That's me as a 4-month-old, and I don't even know who this woman is. And my mother thought enough to take a picture of this woman holding me when they had just adopted me. I had just come out of foster care. And I'm like, who is this person? Who was this caretaker? And so there's this sort of influence of African Americans on little white boys, growing up in South Georgia, that I want to acknowledge and say I'm grateful for, but I don't have a person. I don't have a single person I can point to. And so I don't know if that answered your question, but
No, I think it did. I think to surmise, I think first and foremost, this is a memoir. And then I feel like secondary is that sort of, I don't know if you want to put it in the genre of self-help or something like that, of men in general need to be listening, right? We need to not be mediating these conversations in this way. And I think that it is reflective of the life you have lived. And I think in your first acknowledgement of these are the people in my life. And I do think you acknowledge the African-American women who have been in your life. And also what I found is interesting and kind of related to this is that there's fair amount of vignettes or narratives in here that start with a woman saying something to you or answering your question or imparting something onto you in some way, that they are unnamed, like you don't even know their name, but the impact was large. And I think by including those unnamed people, it paints a broader stroke that this is happening everywhere.
Right. There are these people who they can say a little something or act as an interruption to you in your life, or they can choose to run. There's a therapist in here who said, and this is a direct quote, she said, "Stop talking, you're wrong." Well, for someone to act as an interruption to you is, to me, doing me a great favor. And essentially what she was saying is, listen, you're paying me all this money to come to me. You clearly have issues you want to work on, but when I try to help you, you interrupt me and won't listen. Like, are you paying to come here just to hear yourself talk? Because you're not doing very well. You're paying to hear my take on what's going on with you. So please stop talking and listen to what I'm trying to tell you. Like, I'm the one you're consulting, you're paying me not to tell you, you're great, Stewart, go forth and keep doing what you've been doing, And so a lot of it is women acting as an interruption to me, and how much I learned,
Is that why you included I think you called them cut lines, but where you included some pages where it was just the like takeaway quote from the vignette?
Well, the pull quotes were the design team. So
okay.
Jacqueline Miller at Spark Publications was the primarily one. She's part of a great team, that included, started with Fabi and Mel and all them. And she was the one who took my concepts for books, but she's the one who created this. Well, they were the ones who did the pull quotes too, but it was my idea to put the quotes in the beginning of the chapter. And then, yeah.
Well, I guess this is, I don't know if you can speak more to it or that answers it. One of my questions was, this is like really a multimedia experience book. Like, of course, there's writing. We have touched on that. There are photographs at the beginning of the vignettes, as we have shown you. There are cut lines. At the back of some of the narratives, there are not links, but where to go to listen to more on the podcast to hear the story of the person that is being written about as part of Stewart's life. And I guess I was just wondering, like, how do you feel about the format overall? Do you feel like it's effective in communicating your message and having this multimedia book?
I hope so, because what I like to say is there are only 4 media, other than standing around the campfire singing songs and direct experience. There are only 4 media, and that is static pictures, the still picture, cave paintings, all the way to digital photography is still a static image. Text, the written word, audio, and video or film. That's it, other than direct experience. Now we're getting into immersive video games and all kind of craziness, but those are really the big 4. And so my goal was to include all 4 of them. And so how do you get audio and video? Well, you refer people to the website and they can hear from these women themselves. They can see them come to life, including 2 women who are no longer with us, my mom and my full-blood sister. You can hear them. You can hear their accents, what they were like. My sister in a podcast, and then I hope to include her in a documentary film. And then my mom, who's been dead for almost 9 years. She died in 2011. She just comes back to life, and people can remember how she laughed and what her accent was like. And it's just a beautiful experience to me, that it's not just, kind of it includes, like you said, that texture, of audio, video, still photos, which kind of break through the page, and then the written word.
Well, I love that. I feel like you're getting the story. Everyone's been told a story about their family, about their chosen family, about whatever, and then you hear it from someone else in your family, and it has like another layer to it. And so I love that we get to hear the story and its impact on you, and sort of that, as well as in some places refer to the storyteller and hear them. I think that's not a lot of memoirs get that, and I think that's really special.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's a nice podcast, and it's almost like you run one of those.
Yeah.
I guess I think this is a little departure from what we're talking about, but how is the book a good or pertinent read given everything happening with COVID-19 and like the divisive political climate? Like, how would you sort of pitch it in these times?
Well, the COVID thing is overtly referred to in that the last chapter, my May of 2020 began with a
The
funeral.
funeral and the wedding.
And so it's bracketed with the funeral of my friend Nancy Stevenson, and her husband John Stevenson was at my 4th birthday party. He's one of my oldest friends. He's a college roommate, and Nancy was a probate judge in Albany, Georgia, and she died of the virus. And then the end of that month were my friends Tim and Amy, who asked me to get certified as minister and perform their wedding ceremony. So it's nice, you know. So I refer to COVID overtly in the book. Now, as far as the political climate, you know, my goal in ManListening was to come 180 degrees from Rush Limbaugh. And so my goal was to be not someone who's angry and talking all the time, nonstop, but someone who's not angry, who's peaceful, and who's listening, and who's not, you know, out there blasting feminazis and, you know, grabbing women in one way or another, but someone who is offering respect to a wide variety of women. So that there's no overt political reference, but it's all through it. You know, there's a perspective, and the perspective is respect for women. That's it.
I think the premise and the structure, I think itself is political. Okay. Throughout the book, each chapter or vignette centers around things that women have said or told you. I know we've said this, but some are named and some are unnamed. How many women's voices ended up on the cutting room floor? And was it hard to edit down and figure out what to include and what not to include, considering there are so many wonderful women out there that have influenced you?
Well, I'm happy with where we landed. But what I'm also really, really happy with and want to give props to is to Phoebe. And like, it was very intentional. Like, I went with a local woman-owned publisher. So I could have gone to a variety of publishers, but I went to a local woman-owned independent publisher. That's what Spark Publications is. Local, woman-owned, independent, right? So I'm not having to talk to some person in New York, you know, who's not from the South. You know, I'm not having to try to explain it to them. I'm also not talking to a bunch of men, you know, and so what they did from the very beginning right to today is they talked back to me, and I said, free shot on goal, you know, if this doesn't work. And they had some things, and I said, feel free to tell me I'm an idiot. And they said, or worse. And they said, well, we're not going to tell you you're an idiot, but we're going to say, I'm not sure this serves, you know, like, this is not on message.
This isn't working. Yeah.
Right. It's not on message. Like, if you want to talk to women, don't use this language. Or if you want to talk to women, you know, this is not on message. You're going to need to, you know. And then there was a lot of discussion among, frankly, you know, when you're getting this personal about, well, Lorraine said to me, you are allowed to tell your story. You are not allowed to tell my story. So if there's parts of my story that does not concern you, you do not have my permission to just go and talk about my story. And the thing is, how can you be, particularly when you're an alcoholic in recovery like me, and you're going to talk about your drinking days, how can you talk about the granularity or the details of your drinking days without doing what I call rolling around in your vomit? You know, like just telling war stories and awfulizing, and people are like, that's you're just a disgusting human being. So that's a balance you have to strike. Like, why, you know, how do you remain true to the story without causing unnecessary harm? I guess that's what I wrestle with.
I think that it's a delicate line, right? Especially because this is such a personal book. I mean, it's a memoir, obviously, but it's a personal book to many people that are in your life currently and will continue to be in your life. I assume they approved. Great.
Well, I didn't ask some of them for approval, and so I may be making some amends later on, but you know.
Well, hopefully they didn't register for this event. We don't want them here at Park Road Books then.
No, that's okay. I can take it. I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings.
Well, if someone were to pick up this book, which chapter or story would you want them to read first if it wasn't like the very first one in which you read to us?
What's really interesting and strange is that if people have an aging parent, they key on this chapter, She Trusted Me, which is about my mom.
119. Okay.
And because it's about her getting old and dying. And there have been people bump up against this chapter. That is, that they're going through this with a parent right now, this process, which, you know, where you have to kind of parent your parents and decide what's going to become of them, where are they going to live, and how are they going to, you know, healthcare decisions and that kind of thing. And it's really tough reading if somebody's in the middle of it. And people have like said, I can't read that right now, or people who have just gone through it. And so for people who are a certain age and, you know, their parents are getting older and requiring health care, and is assisted living the right place? Because should they come and live with us? Should I come and live with them? Should they go to a nursing home? Do they require skilled nursing? All these kinds of questions, you know, should they be driving? That's the kind of thing that people will bump up against. But this kind of thing, people who have faced that can really relate to that. And so that, I would say, would be the chapter that I would think, and it's smack dab in the middle of the book too.
I think that's actually what those of you at home who don't know is each chapter is titled and is like a different story, as we've said several ways throughout this. But what's kind of nice is because they're all about your like in relation to someone else. There's kind of a piece for the child of an elderly parent. There's a piece for someone who is struggling in their partnership, someone who is struggling in their relationship to their child, or their child to their parent. And I think there's kind of a little bit, I think this touches on pretty much of the core relationships of most people's life. So there's kind of an entry point for most people. I know that some of the chapters where you talk about your daughters really resonated with me more thinking about my parents, right? And so it's an interesting format in terms of getting people in.
Well, I have two moms or mother figures. I have a birth mother and a mom, and I'm very lucky to have been very good friends with both of them, you know.
Yeah, I didn't even touch on the adopted relationship. That's like a whole huge chunk of the book. Yeah.
Right. And then I have a biological sister and an adopted sister who are my generation. And then I have three daughters. And then I have a wife, a partner of almost 40 years, you know. So on every generation, I have these really strong, you know, where the number of women outnumbered men, you know, two sisters, only one brother, you know, two mother figures, only one father figure that I knew, three daughters, but only one son. So there's all this ever what you want to call it, feminine energy or all this, estrogen all around, and I'm like, that's a great blessing. That's a richness of experience that I need to avail myself of.
Mm-hmm. I assume some of the people here are some of your podcast listeners. So I just thought I would ask, what does this book offer to them that the podcast doesn't? And are there plans for an audiobook? Or is that already an audiobook? Because the voice in it is so strong. I think it would be a lovely audiobook.
Yes, I narrated the audiobook. It's already been uploaded. I didn't know this because I'm still learning a lot. There's a 30 to 45 day delay. So the audiobook will come out in plenty of time for Christmas.
Okay.
Right now, as of today, it's available in printed form. I would prefer people buy it at Park Road Books, but you can buy it wherever books are sold. It is available in ebook form, wherever you get those. And it will be available in audiobook wherever you get audiobooks. So it's not just available at one place.
Great.
It's not just going to be Audible or just Kindle or just Amazon. It's going to be wherever. So you can go to your independent bookseller online or wherever.
We would suggest you use Libro FM and then put the independent
Spell that
bookstore
for the audience. Spell that.
LIBRO.FM. It's an app that does audiobooks, and you can select a bookstore that you want a portion of the proceeds to go to. We would love if you selected Park Road Books, but we want to support all local indies. And
there you go. There you go. And that's how you can support locally independent sourced booksellers and still get an audiobook. Is Libro FM. And so it will be available there in plenty of time for Christmas. You can give it your friends. I narrated it. Joe Kuhlman recorded it in his home studio. And then he tweaked the audio so it is perfection, and uploaded it last week. And there you go. So yes, I narrated it. I wouldn't have anybody else do that because it's my voice. I'm reading my own words. And
I think it really lends itself to audio. I mean, it's beautifully written as well, but I just can imagine hearing one of the vignettes, like driving to work or walking the dog or whatever, cooking, however you do your audiobooks, and then just like that nice succinct 10, 15 minutes would be wonderful.
Yep.
Okay, before we get to audience questions, I feel like I need to ask, now that you've finally written your book, what's next?
Well, I've already written a children's book.
Oh my goodness.
And I've already got an illustrator, and we're working on that. And that's my buddy Marvin Espy. He's at C3 Lab. And he's already begun sketches and characters and all that. And we already have a title. It's called, I never in a million years thought about doing a children's book, but I'm already doing that. And I want to do some kind of speaking. Whether it's workshops, tutorials, paid speaking, whatever, I really want to get out there and do that. And then I've been shooting a documentary for years, and I'm talking to documentary producers. And there's a woman who's worked for HBO. She's working on HBO, and I'm going to talk to her for a different documentary that she's working on at the end of the month, if I can get out to LA safely, and talk to her for that documentary, and then start picking their brain about how to turn this into a film, and the video that I've already shot, and what needs to be reshot, etc. It goes podcast, book, film. I thought it was going to go film, maybe podcast, book, but it needs to go podcast, book, film. So I'm still hoping to do the film.
Interesting.
Planning to do the film. We'll do the film if
you will. And we'll all watch it.
Yes.
And then you'll all come to Park Road Books and buy the children's book.
Yes. Next year.
Online.
That's a 2021 thing. That'll be out in 2021.
Okay, good to know. Well, that's all I have. So I'm going to go to some of your audience questions. Catherine Bacon says, do you think, Stuart, that men not listening to women is a societal construct? And do you think it's a societal construct that can be fixed?
Fixed. Well, I'm just worried about me. But yes, of course, um, I I think it's starting to change. It's just changing really, really slowly. And I do have this little fantasy where every male member of the United States Congress, the Supreme Court, and the West Wing is replaced by a female, and we would have a radically different world, a radically different world. But yes, but it's not limited to the U.S. I mean, there's, misogyny and the patriarchy are pervasive around the world. I mean, the societies which are not patriarchal you have to go look for them.
Few and far between. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. P. Gardurgis, I hope I'm saying that right.
Perry.
Stuart, what was the hardest part or parts to writing this book? Dark night of the soul like stuff, perhaps. Oh, from Perry. Sorry about
that. It's cathartic getting it out. The hardest part is like getting it focused to where it's just not all over the map. But Perry knows that in order that alcoholism, substance use disorder, ever what you want to call it, addiction, is a hereditary genetic disease. Okay, my father died of alcoholism, my sister was an alcoholic, my brother's an alcoholic, I'm an alcoholic. This is all the genetics, right? Mm-hmm. We are 3 for 3, same mother, same father, all 3 of us recovering alcoholics. Well, to not die of the disease, to not be killing yourself in slow motion, you have to do a lot of work to kind of swim up. Having done that work for decades, as Perry knows very, very well, Perry is very active in recovery at a national, even international level. Having done that work, it's almost an obligation to put it down and let people know that addiction and substance use disorder is not a death warrant. It is not. It's just like when someone has cancer, they need to know that that is not a death warrant, that plenty of people survive, and substance use disorder is not a death warrant. That's what I wanted to say. It's almost like I have an obligation to put that down.
I see, like a calling. Okay, we have a lot of questions. Okay, Stuart, what advice do you have for aspiring writers? Who are the team members a writer needs to assemble to help them?
The first person who helped me was a writing coach, and her name was Ann Heffron. And before I ever needed an editor, I needed someone to say, you have a story and your writing is good enough and your writing is fine. Just get it out. And so as the result of her being a constant cheerleader, I never had a day in which I looked at a blank screen and thought, no, that's not good enough. No, that's not good enough. It's the old in praise of the shitty first draft, just get it out, just get it out, just get it out. And then you can always work with it. Just get out your 1,000 words, 3:30 in the morning, just get out the 1,000 words, just get it out, get it out, get it out. We'll shape it later on. We'll figure out where it goes. If it goes in another book, that's fine, but it's all good. There's nothing bad. It's all good. Yeah, just keep going. Just keep writing.
Thomas Einright asks, what was the feedback from your daughters after reading the book?
I just saw in the chat, my daughter said that I had family approval. I didn't know that until tonight.
Well, we got it. We got it in writing here on Zoom. The chat is wild. You got some wild people in your life.
Yeah. Yeah, they're wild, all right.
Okay. Was there, Lee Baber says, was there a surprise revelation for you as you pulled the book together?
That's a good question. There were things that, I wanted Lorraine to read through the whole thing, and she was fond of saying, "Didn't happen. No, it didn't. No, what are you talking about?" And then, like things large and small, I was forced to go back and say, okay, you call yourself a journalist, this has to, the facts have to be accurate. I mean, things like my parents' house, I thought had 5,000 square feet. It had 3,000 square feet. I thought it sold for $100,000. It sold for $200,000. So there are all kinds of things that I was like, still got to be bound by the facts. Still got to, get it as right as we can get it. There was a pub I thought was called, I would have sworn on my grave, was called Murphy's. It was called Kelsey's. I thought it was called Murphy's Pub. It was called Kelsey's Saloon. So it was that kind of thing. It's like, get it right, get it right, get it right. Get it factually accurate.
Well, as a fellow Vanderbilt alum, I can attest to you got a lot of Nashville things right. I'm no fact checker, but I can attest to that.
Yes.
Okay, so this is a question that is really part of the book, but not so much about the writing process. But what advice do you give to individuals who have been adopted and want to find their birth parents?
Think it through before reunion, because it could be in the finding of the birth parents, like a reunion is unavoidable, and you may want to do a lot of really sort of behind the scenes detective work before you make yourself available to these blood relatives. You need to put a lot of thought. What the genealogists say, the family history people, is don't spit in the tube to do the DNA test unless you're prepared for the results. And that means emotionally, psychologically. Don't go knocking on the door unless you're prepared, unless you're an intact, like it could be you're expecting a hug and you get a slap. So if you're really, really banking on this being a hug and you get a slap, then, remember you heard it here first. You got to just be very, there are some people who may tell you again, I don't want you, like I don't want you in my life. And you got to be prepared for that if you go down that road.
Okay. What section did you, this is from Glennis, what section did you have the most trepidation about your audience reading? But I wanted to do this too, Glennis.
Glennis's chapter, I sent it to her, and so Glennis and I had a podcasting conversation, and I was a terrible listener to my daughter, and I apologized to her about that repeatedly in the book. And in that chapter, Glennis owned the word fat. And I got more pushback from beta readers about, have you said that? Like, why would you say that about your daughter? And I said, I'm not saying it. She used that word, and she wanted to, in a way of body positivity, say, it's okay. You can say the word. Doctors say the word. Everybody says the word. Stop saying, well, she's big boned or large or whatever.
A euphemism. Yeah.
Right. Like, that was her word. It wasn't my word. I wasn't calling her. I was quoting her. And they said, are you sure? Because, and Glennis is a remarkably brave human being. But I said, yes, I want her to read it. And so I sent her the chapters and all that. And so I was very, very worried that my daughters would, read something in the book and say, Dad, you're embarrassing us, or you're really publicly embarrassing us.
Well, I'm glad that they didn't.
Yeah.
So we got this great memoir. Priscilla asks, you mentioned that the primary direct demographic for this memoir are middle-aged women who might then secondarily recommend this to men. This, however, hinges on the fact that this book would have to be receptive to reading a book recommended by a woman. Oh, this hinges on the fact that someone would have to be receptive to reading a book recommended by a woman. Therefore, it's most likely is already open to the ideas of trying to become receptive to women, or already are. With that being said, what do you think can be done to outreach this message to men who are not open to the message of listening more to women?
Well, the book's
It's a tough one.
Okay, the book's a story. All right.
Mhm.
So it's just a story. It's not a prescription. I'm not lecturing anybody. I'm not preaching. I'm not lecturing. I'm just telling a story. Okay. So I think that, if you leave it at that, it's just a story. Okay. This is just one guy's story. There are several books and articles out there, and I'll tell you what they are. You Just Don't Understand. That's one book. You're Not Listening. That's another book. And then there's a whole New York Times op-ed, which is Men, You're Not Listening to Women. All three of them written by women, aimed at men, and they use the word you. You're not doing that. You're this, you're that. Nobody wants to hear that. Nobody's going to pay $17.95. I could get that at the head of my dinner table. I don't need to. This does not use the word you. It's what she said and what I heard. How one man shut up and started listening. It's from my perspective. So I can use the pronoun I. I never say you should do anything. And so this is strictly from my perspective. And so the more we share experience and the less we share opinion, in my opinion, the better off we are. If I just say, well, my experience is this, and everyone is entitled to their own experience, as long as I don't tell the world's worst line, you know what your problem is? No. Just, well, let me tell you what's going on with me. This is what my experience is. Then people might be more open to it. Let me just tell you what's going on with me and my experience.
Parts of this book felt like it was opening up, like you were welcoming people into the conversation, not necessarily saying, like, it wasn't like an advice column. It was like you're welcoming them into the conversation. And in that way, it reminded me of Cheryl Strayed has a book called Dear Sugar. And it's like, it's like all these letters. It's essentially an advice column, right? But it feels like the way it's written is inviting people in to think about what's going on, as opposed to this is the definitive way to deal with what's going on.
Right.
So that's interesting. Okay. We have like one or two more things and we'll wrap up. You have great fans, many questions, many comments. George says he loves your humor sprinkled throughout your raw, revealing memoir. I have a feeling that there was a lot of humor that was left out so as not to lighten the book's serious messages. Have you thought about writing a book that is mostly humorous?
No. I mean, I've thought about trying to do, like, what I would love to do is like learn how to do this, tell the same story, the exact same story in 20 minutes of stand-up, 15 minutes of TED Talk, and 15 minutes of Moth story hour.
Yeah.
Like to take the same story and do it in like 3, I think would be absolutely fascinating.
Like like the different iterations and what would come out.
Yeah, because comedy is laughs per minute, right? Just how many laughs you get. TED is how strong is your message? Can you nail it? Can you land it? Moth is how great is the story? Like you get people sucked in the story. So each one of them.
I feel like Moth is a little like, do you touch him in the heart?
Yeah. But you gotta, my buddy Al Tompkins aim for the heart. He always says, aim for the heart. If you aim for the heart, then you're going to get the TED Talk meaning, right? I mean, think about Brene Brown. You know, if you aim for the heart, you're vulnerable, you're open, you're honest, you know, you're revealing, then they get the message, you know. Where sometimes people can laugh and there's not really, it's just
The arc isn't there.
silly, you know, and
Yeah.
sometimes it really is. It's the best way to communicate. So no, George, I had not thought about that, but you know, maybe.
There's a wide future.
Yeah, maybe.
Okay, last question is actually coming from the chat. Larry says, what did you learn about yourself while writing this book? And I think that's a good place to end.
I mean, I learned a great many things, and one is I'm still learning, and that is, well, I'll put it to you this way. Behind the scenes in the deep, deep, dark stuff, I referred to this as the opposite of a suicide note. In a suicide note, someone tells you why they take their own life. In this book, I talk about the darkest moments when I thought about taking my life and all the amazing things that happened because I didn't, you know. And I think we owe it to people to say, you know, I heard the other day that it took my breath away that Audra McDonald, the wonderful, wonderful singer, that she sliced her wrists. And, you know, that there are all these women, Cush Jumbo, I heard on a podcast say that she had been suicidal, you know, to say life is wonderful, just it's gonna get better, it's gonna be, there is healing, you know, it's gonna get better. And so I think I learned that that is a powerful message, that's a powerful leveraging, you know. That addiction is really slow motion suicide. It's suicide on the installment plan. So suicide and addiction are really two sides of the same coin. And I think this is a lot about recovery. This is a lot about healing, you know, and resilience, not just survival, but thriving resilience. And I am a richly, richly blessed man, and I'm eternally grateful, you know, especially for the women in my life who slapped some sense into me. Yeah.
I said that was going to be the last question, and it is, but I would like to end on this comment because I think it encapsulates how I feel about the book, and I think how many people will. Melissa said in the chat that I think Stuart's sense of humor, irreverence, and appreciation of the absurdity of life makes it accessible to men in a way that other women's books might not. So I think that that's a little bit of your answer, and I think all of our answers in this crazy time. I just want to say thank you to everyone for being here. I want to say thank you, Stuart, for being here. Wonderful. I really appreciate everyone's participation, family and all.
Now you're going to save this, right? Isn't this going to YouTube?
Yes, it is. I'm recording it now. You're all being recorded, but none of your photos are on here. Don't worry. And I will upload it to our YouTube.
Now,
and then,
how about the chat? Is there a way to preserve the chat? Because the chat, these people were on fire down here.
I think there is a way. I will figure it out.
Okay.
We're sort of new to virtual events here at Park Road Books. We won't lie. However.
Oh, wait a minute. I just did it.
Oh, look.
What you do is you go down into the chat, and then those three dots on the side where it says panelists.
Save chat. Chat
it says save chat. Booyah. There you go. Technology.
I love it. Look at that. Stuart just saved so many things at Park Road Books. We should be paying him.
And no, my daughter said, oh, wait, no, I can't because I'm not a host. Never mind. But I just did it, Erin.
Yeah, we're hosts. They're not.
Oh, so we just did it. Booyah. There you go. Okay.
And so remember, everyone, you can buy the book at Park Road Books. You can buy it online with us. You can buy it by calling. We ship all over the US. I know that I talked to some of you this week and shipped it. And yeah, you can call, you can come by, you can do it online, buy it. Okay, that's it, guys. Have a good night. Thank you so much.
Thank you.